The cardboard sign trembled in his left hand, because his right hand could no longer hold anything heavier than a coffee cup, and the marker letters had already begun to bleed in the Phoenix sun. Vietnam veteran. Agent Orange. 8 years DNID. Please help. He sat on a folded army blanket the color of old bone, his back against the low concrete wall outside the Carl T. Hayden VA Medical Center, and the noon light came straight down on the top of his bare head like an interrogation lamp. 76 years old. 121 pounds soaking wet. A bronze star with a V device for valor pinned to the inside of his jacket pocket, where nobody could see it because, as he had said quietly to a nurse the week before, a man does not wear his medals to ask for change. His name was Earl Hollies. He had been a sergeant in the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry. He had bled in the Ia Drang Valley, and again 2 years later near a nameless ridge above the A Shao. And now, he could not get the Phoenix VA to acknowledge that the tumor in his throat had anything at all to do with the chemical defoliant he had walked through for 13 months in 1968. 8 years of denied claims. 3 GS civilian case managers, each of whom had retired or transferred before his file moved. He had not eaten a real meal in 2 days, and he was about to lose the room he rented off Indian School Road. And in exactly 43 minutes, a 4-vehicle military convoy was going to stop directly in front of him, and the man who climbed out of the staff car was going to recognize his face from a black and white photograph folded inside a wallet for 57 years. Stay with me on this one. Earl had arrived at the VA at 8 in the morning, the way he had every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. He took the number 19 bus from the corner of Glendale and 19th Avenue. The driver, a Filipino woman named Marisol who had a son in the Marines, no longer asked for fare. He carried a green canvas folder that had once held maps in a command tent at Camp Evans. Inside it he kept his original DD-214, a photocopy of his unit's morning reports from August of 1968, a letter from a Tucson VA doctor who had written the word presumptive in red ink and then crossed it out, and a laminated photograph of his wife, Mary Ellen, who had died of an aneurysm in 2017. He had been bringing the folder to the Phoenix VA for so long that 2 security guards now stood up when he walked through the front door, because a man like Earl Hollies still meant something to people who had been taught what it meant. He had a 9:30 appointment with a benefits advisor named Mr. Daly, 31 years old, who had inherited Earl's file the previous September from a woman named Patricia, who had inherited it from a man named Greg. Mr. Daly was not a bad person. He was simply a young GS civilian employee inside a system that punished initiative and rewarded the closing of tickets, and Earl's case was the kind that did not close. At 9:42, he came out into the waiting area with a clipboard pressed flat against his chest, the way people hold clipboards when they are about to say something they have rehearsed. Mr. Hollies, he said, I have an update on your appeal. Earl did not look up. He had heard those words 11 times in 8 years. He simply set his thumb on the edge of the folder and waited. The Board of Veterans' Appeals has remanded your file for additional development, Mr. Daly said. They're asking for contemporaneous documentation of in-country herbicide exposure within a quarter-mile radius of your reported area of operations. Earl finally turned his head. The skin under his eyes was the color of a wet paper bag. Son, he said very softly, I was the herbicide exposure. I walked through it. It came down on us out of a C-123 at first light on the 14th of August, 1968. Mr. Daly looked at his clipboard. He looked at the floor. I understand, sir. But the board requires the documentation. The documentation, Earl said, is in a warehouse in St. Louis that burned down in 1973. I'll resubmit the request, sir. You've resubmitted it 4 times. I'll resubmit it a 5th, sir. Earl nodded once. He stood up the way old infantrymen stand up, leaning his weight forward over his good leg. He picked up the green folder. He thanked Mr. daily because his mother had raised him to thank people even when there was nothing to thank them for, and he walked out through the sliding glass doors into the Phoenix noon. The thermometer on the side of the parking structure read 104 degrees. He sat down on the low concrete wall, took the cardboard sign out from inside his folder, and held it up to the street. It was 11:47. He had 13 minutes. Across town, at that exact moment, a four-vehicle convoy was rolling south on 7th Street at a careful 45 miles an hour. Two black Suburbans bracketed a dark blue Cadillac with government plates and a small red plate on the dashboard bearing 3 silver stars. The man in the middle was Lieutenant General Marcus Thaddeus Reyes, United States Army, Commanding General of Army North, on his way to give the keynote at a Veterans Employment Summit near Sky Harbor. The route took him past the Phoenix VA. The driver of the lead Suburban, a quiet warrant officer named Boggs, had grown up 3 blocks from that hospital, and as the convoy approached the campus, he eased off the gas, because he always eased off the gas there, and he glanced toward the front entrance, and he saw the old man. He saw the old man, and he saw the sign, and he keyed his microphone. "Sir, you got a sec?" "Go ahead, Boggs." "There's a vet on the wall up here. Cardboard sign. Looks bad." Inside the Cadillac, General Reyes lifted his eyes from a briefing folder. He was 63, the son of a Mexican-American steelworker from Pueblo, Colorado. He had 3 stars on each shoulder and 41 years in uniform, and he had spent the morning being told by polite people in air-conditioned rooms that the system was working as designed. He looked out the tinted window. The old man on the wall was very thin. The old man on the wall had a chin that came to a point in a way the general had seen only one other time in his life. "Boggs," he said, "pull the convoy over." "Sir?" "Pull it over. Right here. In front of the hospital." There was a pause on the radio. Then Boggs said, very calmly, "Roger that, sir," and the 4 vehicles slid to the curb in a single coordinated motion. Doors opened. Boots hit pavement. A small crowd coming out of the lobby for their lunch break stopped where they stood. The general did not wait for his aide. He opened his own door, because he had been opening his own doors since 1985, and he stepped out into the white heat of the Arizona noon. He walked across the sidewalk in the unhurried way of a man who has learned that hurrying does not help. He stopped 6 feet in front of Earl Holly's. He simply looked at the sign, and then at the man, and then at the sign again. The flap of his Class A jacket lifted once in a small hot wind and settled. "Sergeant," he said. Earl looked up. The sun was behind the general's head, and Earl had to squint, and at first he saw only the silhouette of 3 stars on a shoulder and a service cap, and he thought, in the slow way old men think when the body has stopped giving them enough sugar, that someone important had come to ask him to move along. He did not put down the sign. He had been asked to move along before. "Sir," he said, "I'm not blocking the entrance." The general crouched. He went all the way down on one knee, in a 104-degree parking lot, in a perfectly pressed uniform, and brought his face level with Earl's. "Sergeant," he said again, "I asked you a question. Are you Earl Holly's 1st of the 7th Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon?" Earl's hand began to shake. The cardboard sign sagged against his knee. "I am," he said. "Then put the sign down, Sergeant." "You won't be needing it." Earl did not put the sign down. He could not. His fingers had locked. The general reached out, very gently, took the cardboard out of his hand, and laid it flat on the wall with the writing facing up so that no one could later pretend they had not seen it. Then he stood and spoke over his shoulder to the master sergeant. "Top," he said, "I need water cold 2 bottles. I need a chair from the lobby. I need the hospital director out here, in person, in 3 minutes. And I need somebody to get the public affairs officer to put his phone away before I take it from him." "Yes, sir." "And Top." "Sir." "Call Major Whitfield. Tell her the schedule for the rest of the day is canceled. The summit can wait. We are not leaving this curb until I say we leave this curb." "Yes, sir." The Phoenix sun beat down on the four vehicles and on the crowd that was beginning to gather. The general turned back. He sat down on the low wall beside Earl Hollies in his Class A trousers, on concrete hot enough to blister a palm, and he did not move and he did not flinch. He waited until the master sergeant came back with the water. He cracked one bottle open himself. He held it out. "Drink, Sergeant." Slowly. Small sips. Earl drank. A little water ran down his chin and onto the front of his shirt, and he did not have the strength to wipe it away, and the general, with the back of one knuckle, did it for him. "Sir," Earl said when he could speak. "Have we met?" The general did not answer that question. "Not yet." He simply said, "8 years, Sergeant." "8 years, sir." Agent Orange. Throat. Started in the lymph nodes. Spread, they tell me, although they don't tell me much. Service connected. They say not, sir. They say I can't prove I was where I was. The general was quiet for a long beat. Then he said, "Hooah, Sergeant." Earl blinked. It had been a long time since anyone had said that word to him in the open air. He swallowed. He could not speak. "Hooah, sir," he managed finally in a whisper. The hospital director came out at 12:04. Her name was Dr. Corinne Vance. She had been in a budget meeting on the second floor when an aide had run in and said the words "3-star general" and "front entrance" in the same breath, and she had come down without her jacket. She stopped a careful distance away. The general did not stand. "Dr. Vance," he said without looking at her. "General Reyes. Tell me, doctor, do you know who this man is?" Dr. Vance looked at Earl. She looked at the sign on the wall. She had, in fact, signed the most recent denial 9 days earlier, in a stack of 42 letters during a routine Thursday afternoon, her signature a small black scribble below the words, "We regret to inform you." "Sir," she said carefully, "I would have to look at his file. His name is Earl Hollies. Sergeant Earl Hollies. 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon. He was at LZ Albany. He was in the Ashau Valley. He has a bronze star with V device that he did not wear here today because he is a man of more dignity than the system you and I represent has shown him. He has been coming to your hospital twice a week for 6 months, and his claim has been denied 4 times in 8 years on the grounds that he cannot prove he was where every man with a working memory knows he was. Now, do you know who this man is?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Then I am going to ask you to walk back into that building, past the cubicle of every benefits advisor between the front door and your office, and pull Sergeant Hollies' file personally and bring it out here, to this wall, within 20 minutes. Are we clear, Doctor?" "Yes, General." "Doctor." "Sir." "Do not run. He has waited 8 years. He can wait 20 minutes more. But you will not keep him waiting 21. She did not run. She walked fast in low heels, and the sliding glass doors swallowed her up. The general turned back to Earl. He cracked the second bottle of water. He waited. "Sir," Earl said after a long time, "may I ask you something?" "You may ask me anything, Sergeant." "How did you know my unit?" The general reached up to the front of his jacket. He unbuttoned a small inside pocket above his name tape, the pocket where officers of his generation kept the things they were not willing to lose. He took out a leather wallet, opened it, and slid free a photograph folded into quarters, the creases so old they had softened into the cardstock like riverbeds into a map. He unfolded it. He held it where Earl could see it. The crowd had gone very quiet. It was a black and white photograph of a young rifle squad in Vietnam. Boonie hats. Open jungle fatigues. A medic on one knee in the front. And in the middle, holding the squad together the way the strap of a rucksack holds a rucksack together, a young sergeant with a chin that came to a point and a bronze star ribbon on his pocket flap. In front of the sergeant, sitting cross-legged on the dirt, his right arm in a different sling, his face still streaked with the dirt of a firefight from the night before, was an 8-year-old Vietnamese boy. Earl's hand began to shake again. He took the photograph between 2 fingers. He brought it close to his face. He stared at it for a long time. His mouth opened and closed. "Lord," he whispered. "Lord, oh Lord." "Sergeant," the general said, "do you remember a village south of Anki in October of 1968? Earl did not answer in words. He nodded. Once. Twice. His eyes had filled. "Do you remember pulling a child out of a hooch on the second night of a contact with a North Vietnamese reconnaissance element? Carrying him 3 clicks back to a casualty collection point on your back because the medic said his shoulder was dislocated and he could not walk." Earl was crying without sound now. His shoulders shook. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown to perhaps 40 people, and not one was speaking, and a young woman in scrubs had pressed both hands flat over her mouth. "Do you remember leaving him at an orphanage in Pleiku with a chocolate bar and a note pinned to his shirt that said his name is Marco, signed E. Hollis, Sergeant, United States Army? Do you remember that, Sergeant?" "I remember, sir. I remember." "Sergeant," the general's voice did not rise. It did not have to. Marco was the name that boy carried for the rest of his life. The Vietnamese sisters at the orphanage kept the note. A Catholic family in Pueblo, Colorado, adopted him in 1971. They did not change his first name out of respect for the man who had given it to him. They added their own last name. Reyes. Earl looked up from the photograph. He looked at the 3 silver stars. He looked at the face in front of him. He saw, for the first time, the shape of the chin he had once tilted up with 2 fingers in October of 1968, so that a frightened child would look him in the eye and stop screaming. He made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a sob. "You," he said. "You? Marco?" "Yes, Sergeant. You're alive." "I am alive, Sergeant. I am alive because of you. And I have been looking for you for 31 years. The crowd on the sidewalk made a single low sound, the kind a crowd makes when it has been holding its breath without knowing it. A man took off his ball cap and held it against his chest. A woman near the curb sat down on the concrete because her knees had stopped working. A security guard from the lobby put his hand flat against the glass door and bowed his head. "Doctor." Vance came back out at 12:22. She had a thick brown folder in her hands. Her eyes were red. She had clearly looked inside it on the way down the hall. She stopped in front of the general and Earl, and she did not pretend to be a director of anything. She stood there like a person. "Sir," she said. "His file." The general did not take it. "Read it to him, doctor." Out loud. "The parts that matter." She did. She read out the morning report from August of 1968, listing Sergeant E. Hollis present for duty in the Eastern A-Shao. She read out the unit citation, mentioning Bravo Company's transit through a defoliated zone. She read out the Tucson VA letter with presumptive, in red. She read out, voice cracking, the 4 denial letters, including the one she had signed 9 days before. The general did not interrupt. He sat on the hot concrete wall with his arm around the shoulders of a 121-pound Vietnam veteran, and he listened. When she was done, he said, "Doctor, you and I are going to walk into that building. Together, with Sergeant Hollis between us. We are going to walk into the office of the Chief of Compensation and Pension without an appointment, and you are going to approve this claim at 100% service connection, with 8 years of back pay today in the next 90 minutes, while I am still in this building. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "And then, doctor, you and I are going to have a separate conversation about the other 41 letters you signed last Thursday." "Yes, sir." The general stood. He held out his hand. Earl took it and came up off the wall in stages, the way old infantrymen come off any low thing they have sat on, and the general did not hurry him. The small crowd began, one by one, to come to attention. A man in a faded squadron ball cap saluted. A woman with a service dog put her hand over her heart. A teenager who had been filming on a cracked phone lowered it and stood up straight without being told to, because something inside him had recognized what he was watching even though he did not yet have a name for it. The three of them walked toward the doors. The cardboard sign stayed on the wall behind them. Boggs, the warrant officer, walked over later and folded it carefully along its crease and put it under the front seat of the lead Suburban, where it would stay for the rest of his career. Inside the building, the work began. The chief of compensation and pension was a tall man named Bauer who had been with the agency for 27 years, and when the general walked into his office without knocking, Bauer stood up so fast he knocked his coffee over. He did not bother to clean it. The general did not sit. He said, "Mr. Bauer, I would like you to walk Sergeant Hollies through every step of his claim today until the words 100%, service connected, effective the date of original filing are on a piece of paper that he can take home in his hand. Back pay calculated, direct deposit setup, temporary housing voucher issued before he leaves this floor. I will be sitting in the chair against that wall, and I will not be leaving it. Top, get the sergeant a sandwich. A real one. From outside. Yes, sir." It took 97 minutes. At 1:53 in the afternoon, Earl walked out of Bauer's office with an approved rating decision under his arm. The number on the page was 100%. The effective date was the date he had first filed, 8 years earlier. The back pay, calculated with a pencil on a yellow pad, was just over $412,000. He did not look at the number for long. He folded the paper, put it inside the green canvas folder, and tied the string. He looked at the general. "Sir," he said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Sergeant. You said it once already in 1968, with a chocolate bar and a note. I have been trying to say it back ever since." They walked out of the building together. The crowd outside had grown. Somebody had brought a small folding flag on a wooden stick and set it in the crack at the top of the low concrete wall. The teenager with the cracked phone had posted his video, and by 2 o'clock it had been shared 180,000 times. By the end of the day, it would be 3 million, and by the end of the week, the United States Senate would have a hearing on the schedule that did not exist that morning. Earl did not know any of that yet. He simply walked slowly, with the general on one side and Dr. Vance on the other, to the curb where the convoy was still parked. The general stopped at the open door of the Cadillac. He turned and faced Earl Hollies. He came to attention. He brought his right hand up in a salute so slow and so square it could have been the textbook example of how the gesture is supposed to be made. He held it. "Sergeant Hollies," he said, "on behalf of the United States Army, on behalf of every man who came home from that valley, and on behalf of a boy in a hooch south of Nkey in October of 1968. Welcome home, sir. Welcome home." Earl raised his right hand. His fingers shook. His elbow would not lock. He held the salute anyway, with the last strength in his thin right arm, until the general brought his own hand down, and only then did Earl lower his, and only then did he allow himself to lean against the side of the staff car for support. The general did not get into the car. He walked Earl to the white Tahoe, put him in the back seat and said, "Top. Summit is canceled. Take us to a hotel. Get the sergeant a room. Tomorrow he and I have breakfast, and the day after that we go to Washington." "Yes, sir." They drove away from the Phoenix, VA at 2:17 in the afternoon under a hard white sun. The folder was on Earl's lap. The general sat beside him with his cap on his knee. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Outside the tinted windows, a small Filipino woman driving the number 19 bus saw the convoy pass and did not know, and would not know for 2 more days, that the thin old man she had been driving twice a week for 6 months was the passenger inside it. 6 days later, on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, Earl Hollies sat at a witness table in the Russell Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C. He wore a new dark suit, because the general had refused to let him buy a cheap one, and on his lapel he wore the Bronze Star itself, taken at last out of the inside pocket of a jacket and pinned where it had always belonged. General Reyes sat directly behind him in Class A's, with a photograph from his wallet in his breast pocket. The galleries were full. 3 networks were carrying the hearing live. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, a white-haired senator from Montana who had himself served as a hospital corpsman in 1971, leaned forward into his microphone. "Sergeant Hollies," he said, "take whatever time you need." Earl placed both of his hands on the edge of the table. The right one trembled a little. The left one did not. He looked at the row of senators. He looked behind him at the general. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Chairman," he said, "members of the committee, my name is Earl Hollies. I was a sergeant in the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry. I came home from Vietnam in November of 1969. I worked at a sheet metal shop in Glendale for 31 years. I buried my wife in 2017. I filed my first VA claim for Agent Orange exposure in 2018. It was denied. I filed it 4 more times. It was denied 4 more times. Last Tuesday, I was sitting on a wall outside the Phoenix VA with a cardboard sign because I had run out of options, and I had run out of pride, and I had not run out of cancer. A general of the United States Army stopped his convoy. He recognized me. He sat down on a hot wall in his dress uniform and made the system do what it should have done 8 years ago without him. I am here today because of him. But I am also here because there are 240,000 Vietnam veterans in this country with pending Agent Orange claims, and there is not a general for every one of them, and there cannot be. The system has to work without the general. That is the only thing I want to say. The system has to work without the general. Thank you, Mr. Chairman." He sat back. The chairman did not speak. The room did not speak. The general behind him reached forward very quietly and placed his right hand on Earl's shoulder and did not take it away. The hearing went on for 4 more hours. Bauer testified by video link. Dr. Vance testified in person, did not try to defend the 41 letters, and resigned the following week. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs testified the next morning and announced a top-to-bottom audit of every Agent Orange claim denied in the past 10 years, with automatic re-adjudication of any claim whose records had been destroyed in the 1973 fire at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. The audit, completed 18 months later, identified 91,000 veterans wrongly denied. 63,000 of them were still alive to receive their back pay. 28,000 were not. Earl Hollies received his treatment at a private oncology center outside Tucson because the general insisted, and he lived 2 more years and 4 months. He spent the first of those years giving short, quiet interviews to small newspapers in towns whose VA clinics had been on the audit list, because he had said in his testimony that the system had to work without the general, and he was not going to be the kind of man who said a thing and then did not show up to help make it true. He spent the second year at a small house outside Pueblo, Colorado, on land the general and his wife had bought for him without telling him, and he sat on the porch in the evenings with a glass of iced tea, and a Catholic family with the last name Reyes came out to see him every Sunday after Mass. He died on a Thursday morning in March in his own bed with clean sheets, the green canvas folder on the nightstand, a folded photograph of an 8-year-old boy in a sling tucked into its cover, and the hand of Marcus Thaddeus Reyes, retired by then for 6 months, resting on his. At the funeral, on a cold blue morning in the cemetery in Pueblo, an honor guard from Fort Carson fired 3 volleys. A bugler played taps. A folded flag was handed, very carefully, to the general, and the general laid it in the lap of Mary Ellen Hollies' older sister, who had flown in from Phoenix, and who had kept the banker's box of paperwork under her kitchen table for 8 years, without knowing she was guarding the proof of a life. The general stood for a long moment with his hand on the back of her chair. Then he walked to the head of the grave, came to attention and saluted, and he held it, and the wind came down off the mountains and lifted the corner of the flag and let it down again, and the general did not move until the bugler's last note had finished. Then he lowered his hand and said, just loud enough for the headstone to hear it, "Hoo-ah, Sergeant. Semper Fi, brother. Rest easy. The convoy stops here." And on a low concrete wall, 800 miles to the southwest, outside a hospital where 41 letters had once been signed in a single afternoon, a small brass plaque had been bolted into the stone the previous summer. It did not have a name on it. It did not need one. It read in plain block letters, "This wall is reserved. No veteran will ever sit here alone again." And on most days in the noon sun, you could find a benefits advisor from inside the building sitting on it, a folder open on his knees, taking a claim by hand, the way Sergeant Earl Hollies had needed his to be taken, 8 years too late, and yet somehow exactly on time.